That was the extent of my Russian I just used there. First of all, thank you for hosting me here in Voronezh. I'm very pleased to come and introduce Singularity University to you, and we're actually going to go get to see some films tonight as well. So, thank you. As Andre mentioned, I'm the head of new ventures and strategy at Singularity University. I'm very excited to be expanding us around the world in what is a new type of education model, and very focused specifically on trying to have a big impact on the world's biggest problems, which is what drives a lot of the passion behind not just the students, but the people who work at Singularity University and the organizations that are partnered with us and support us. We were founded 4 years ago. We are based in NASA, as one of NASA's research parks. We're not part of NASA, but they're a partner of ours, and we're hosted on their campus in Silicon Valley, not too far from Google and Stanford University and the rest of Silicon Valley, which has its advantages. The corporate partners up there were the ones responsible for supporting us as we launched 4 years ago with our first program. And basically, two individuals co-founded Singularity University. Dr. Peter Diamandis, who also founded the X Prize Foundation, which really pioneered using prizes to basically innovate entire industries by putting up a $10 million prize and then having individual teams go out and raise a total of over $100 million to put into that competition. The first X Prize was for the Ansari X Prize, which you may know Burt Rutan won by sending an individual into inner space twice within 2 weeks. That was subsequently licensed by Richard Branson and became Virgin Galactic, that technology, which is expected to launch next year and is one of the few early commercial space line industries. Peter has been an entrepreneur many times over. He wrote a book called Abundance, which is a bestseller, and I urge you to read it. It highlights how our world will change with abundant resources all around us once we learn how to convert it. Ray Kurzweil wrote The Singularity is Near, and his ideas and his life's work are really the underpinning of the university. Ray is what we call a polymath, which is rare these days. As science has moved forward, individuals have been forced to spend more and more time in one area, becoming specialists, driving to the edge and the frontier of that discipline to move it forward a little tiny bit. Historically, you had great thinkers who were able to become experts in many areas. You can think about people like Leonardo da Vinci or Ben Franklin in the US and others. Ray is one of the few people who was able to do this in modern times and had a deep understanding of all of the different scientific frontiers. Genetics, artificial intelligence, computing, and he'd spent his life really tracking technologies and understanding where they were going as he tried to build businesses that would leverage technologies that are not here today but will be here 18 months from now. Quick question, how many people are technical in here, are studying technical versus literature or arts or something? So I just get a sense. How many people have heard of the Google self-driving car? Okay. All right, so Moore's Law. Does everybody know Moore's Law? Okay, so the chart that you see there is basically, it's an exponential curve. So it's Moore's Law, essentially, and you can see how it tracks the price performance of computing. So basically, the number of calculations you can get if you spend the same amount of money per second. And Gordon Moore identified this pattern that you were getting twice the performance every 18 months. He coined the term Moore's Law on the same chip. And that has continued ever since he predicted that it would, which I believe was in the 60s. And what Ray Kurzweil realized that this law of accelerating returns applied much more broadly than chips, that it actually applied to most technologies, including storage, how fast we exchange information between each other, either through mobile or internet, biotech, and what you see there all the way on the left is kind of electromechanical, which was punch cards, right? The earliest computing technology. And actually there was one before that, which was actually the loom and the weave, the punch card actually came from prior technology of kind of the loom and the weave. But it's all been one long continuous curve, and it gets faster and faster through vacuum tubes, transistors. And Ray became excellent at predicting where things would be. So he has a series of predictions all the way out, and I'll show you some of those. And Peter read his book that focused on how these technologies are converging, because polymaths, when they have understandings of lateral areas, can see insights and practice that interdisciplinary thinking where many of the innovations come from. And Peter said we need to start a university that's focused on teaching people to think this way and to be interdisciplinary. So he approached Ray, they founded the school, and basically one of the things that underpins it is this history and forward look of technology. We're not an accredited university in many ways. Like Open University, we're kind of not really a university. We have a summer program that runs 10 weeks, and then we have 1-week programs. And we're taking people who already have a deep expertise in one area and giving them an introduction of how to use these other areas. But a lot of it is based on this. And what you can see here is the history of technology with 9,000 years history to the left on the bottom axis, and then the population of the world on the left axis. And you can see from the earliest technologies of the agricultural revolution that not only was the distance between technological innovations very long, but that the population was also growing very slowly. Now, it actually was on an exponential curve at that time, but like most exponential curves, you can't see it. If I put a drop of water in the middle of the room and I tell you that that water will double every minute or every 10 seconds, you actually won't notice that it's an exponential growth curve for some time. We don't think exponentially. So if I told you that I was going to take 30 linear steps across the room, you could all predict where I'd wind up, right? I'd wind up somewhere down there. If I told you that I would be taking 30 exponential steps, a few people here would predict that I would be 26 times around the Earth. And Ray understood this as he started building businesses that played into some of these technologies. And one of the things we do is teach people to think that way. Here, right about the bend in that curve before the engine and the railroads, 1500, that's about the Renaissance, when the printing press was invented, which really allowed for the widespread dissemination of information and learning. And you can see what's happened since. The technologies and their advancements are really happening, and you should be able to feel this even within the last 10 years, right? The engines, phones, computers, cable, internet, social media, mobile phones, and it's continuing now with low-cost sensors and the connectivity of everything. Not just a computer or a phone, but my clothes being connected, all the physical things in my house being connected. And with that, a commensurate rise in population, when you have things like better medicine and better food production and things like that, that's enabled a lot of it, technology. That was backward looking. Let's look forward now. In the middle of this graph, on the left side, you can actually see a smaller version of the curve I showed you on the first slide, where you see the history of computers. Right about now, a US $1,000 laptop has the computing power in terms of processing calculations, processing power of the brain of a mouse. 10 years ago, it had the processing power of an insect brain. But by 2023, 10 years from now, it's expected to have the processing power of a human brain. And more interesting than that is by 2050, or 40 years from now, a $1,000 laptop will have the processing power of all 8 billion human brains combined in one laptop. And what we've seen from the curves, the historical curves, that's interesting, two things. One, nothing ever stops the advance. Wars, famines, droughts, technology stays on this curve from thousands of years ago. And to some extent, our biology and other things are also on similar exponential curves with accelerating returns. And Bill Gates has thus called Ray Kurzweil the best person at predicting the future. So few of us think about that kind of processing power. What might we do with it? And we're going to look at some technologies and things that are coming today and think about how it will impact us, and more importantly, what we focus on is how can we use those to solve some of the world's biggest problems. We were founded with a conference of 50 individuals from Silicon Valley, including Vint Cerf, who was one of the co-founders of the internet, Craig Venter, and others. In that, Larry Page, one of the founders of Google, was there. And they discussed how many of the world's biggest problems are also rooted in exponential factors. So our pollution, the depletion of our natural resources, climate change. And so we really need exponential tools to help solve them. And as they thought about what Singularity University would become, Larry issued a challenge and said, let's not create anything unless it's going to focus on solving the world's biggest problems. For most people, they're not working on something like that. And that became an underpinning of the university. So our mission now is to really teach a new class of leaders how to leverage these exponential technologies, how to think exponentially to solve the world's biggest problems. And basically, we try to find the most talented individuals we can from all over the world, teach them these technologies and this thinking, and then focus them on those challenges. Those are the kind of the three pillars. We run a 10-week graduate studies program, 80 students, 36 countries. Our 7-day program is going to run 6 times next year. That's typically executives, government officials, and other people from around the world who are more senior in their careers. I'll talk a little bit more about what the student profile is in our graduate studies program. We also run a 7-day program focused exclusively on healthcare and how all the technologies are impacting healthcare. And we're going to be rolling out more industry verticals for the future of security, the future of manufacturing, education, etc. And then we do custom programs around the world at different points. We did one with Open University back in May in Moscow, and we continue to do those as well. I'm going to go into the summer program a little bit now. Some of the technology tracks that we teach are artificial intelligence and robotics, nanotechnology and digital fabrication, networks and computing systems, which really underlies most of this. It's when a lot of these technologies become information enabled that they get on that exponential growth curve. Biotechnology and bioinformatics, medicine, neuroscience. And then we also teach people what we call resource tracks, which is some of the ethics and the law around these changes and how to think about public perception, government policy. Of course, is always lagging technology, but now we've been talking about how technological change is going to accelerate. And so policy will continue to fall further behind in being able to address the challenges that come with that. We have track chairs who are thought leaders in each of these areas, who have really at the forefront of thinking in these areas, and they help develop the courses that will be taught during our programs. At the same time, we do have faculty who, kind of visiting faculty, who are Nobel Prize winners, and Vint Cerf and Craig Venter, who obviously pioneered much in genetics and synthetic biology, etc. And we've been very fortunate to attract thought leaders from all different areas to kind of put this interdisciplinary program together. One of the things that's unique about Singularity University is that because we're focused on the cutting edge, we have to update our curriculum regularly. In fact, we update it before every single course. We have a curriculum planning meeting and go through every presentation and incorporate the latest advances in all of the fields. So it's really as real time as we can get it, which is something unique. And most of the curricula taught in universities, A, most of it's backward looking, and B, it doesn't get updated as often as it should. I talked a lot about exponential growth, exponential thinking. Another key kind of pillar in philosophy in the university is convergence, right? This interdisciplinary nature of scientific areas of study. What this is a visual map of over 1,200 research papers. And certain scientific terms that appeared in multiple papers were connected. And then those bubbled up into approximately 23 areas of scientific study. And it's really at the connection of these where we're taking people to identify the innovations. And the type of thinking is a mental exercise. Much the same way someone who studied as a chef in Japan, Italy, and Mexico can create a fusion dish more regularly and combine those with a deep understanding of them, the same is true as you begin to develop an understanding of these technologies. And really, there's multiple technologies, these are some, that are accelerating now, and they're breaking these barriers of price that really allow the general population to start to innovate with them. And one of the things that we saw after the computer industry, which still was capital intensive and included physical goods, the software industry really had no costs, and that's where you saw young people really enter the innovation game and become explosive in terms of the innovations that they produced. And you saw a lot of young billionaires and successful people as a result as well. We're going to see more of what we call a democratization of innovation as all of these things become cheaper as they get on this exponential curve and they become digitized. Information moves for free. We're going to talk about 3D printing and how physical things are heading towards that direction as well, to the extent that they can. I'm going to highlight a few areas. I'll be talking a little bit about the school. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we discussed. I'll show you some of the projects as well that some of our alumni are working on. So the Internet of Things is really a term that's used to discuss what will ultimately be the ubiquitous or nature of low-cost sensors everywhere. Because sensors are getting so cheap and more physical things are being wired to the Internet. It started with websites, then you move from websites to mobile phones, where they're expected to be 5 billion, and some of the projections on that as prices come down globally really will overtake traditional computing from a desktop or laptop. But the projection for physical goods being wired to the Internet is actually 50 billion. The cameras in the room, the heaters, the lights, everything in your house, your refrigerator, can all be wired and connected, and you're seeing a lot of this already for energy management, smart buildings. That will continue. We have companies coming out of Singularity University that are using sensors in your clothing to track your biohealth and other sorts of biodata, so to do quantified health. So that will all continue until we become more and more connected. And it means an entire set of opportunities for new entrepreneurs and new innovators. How many of you are familiar with IBM's Watson supercomputer? Okay, so Watson was an advanced supercomputer, artificial intelligence. And IBM had been working on continuing to improve the frontier of artificial intelligence. Watson competed in a famous game show called Jeopardy, and actually competed against the world's 2 champions recently, I think it was last year, and beat them both handily. Now, this is significant for a number of reasons. Watson was scanning 3 million internet pages and had to come up with an answer before the 2 champions did. But if you're not familiar with the game, the way it's played is that you're given the answer. So you're given facts, and then you have to answer with the question. You have to answer with, who is James Cameron? And what you'll do is you get this person made these movies, made the Titanic, and then you have to answer. But there's a lot of slang. And so this is incredibly difficult for computers to process. We're very good at making those leaps. Specifically double meanings of words and things like this. But Watson was able to do that, and in so started to adapt some of the more challenging aspects of human intelligence. Applications for Watson going forward, just a few are healthcare. The amount of medical research and advances that are coming out globally are incredibly difficult, really impossible for any physician or doctor to stay up to date on all the time. And to be able to optimize their ability to diagnose someone with the most current information is something that is inherently good for computer machine intellectual horsepower and not so much for human intellectual horsepower. So one area, healthcare, is being able to support physicians with better diagnosis by immediately scanning and using algorithms all of the medical research, data, results, and even be able to draw diagnoses with a number of symptoms with probabilities, which will continue to advance until it exceeds human capability. Education is another very exciting area for artificial intelligence. Imagine a world where there's one artificial intelligence like Watson online, but you can access it from any website, phone, device in the world, and there is an artificial intelligence tutor that will teach you any subject and can adapt. So it can say, oh, I see you're having trouble when I use a visual learning technique, maybe I should try an auditory style. I see you're having trouble with fractions, let's go back. So it's a personalized, customized tutor, just for you, free with access to all of the world's information. Imagine the impact this would have on humanity. And when you think about where Watson is today, that's actually not that far off because you only need to build it once and make it available to people. This would be able to benchmark you against students from around the world or people from around the world. So it's very exciting. 3D printing has been a hot topic of discussion recently. 3D printing is going to have significant impacts on society in ways people don't realize. But ultimately, what we've done is we've taken physical goods and we've digitized them into zeros and ones in AutoCAD files, and we can email those around. And then once we have a 3D printer, we can just print our physical good with the raw materials right where we are. And already now I think 3D printers can already print 70% of the parts to produce another 3D printer. That will quickly go to 100%. At which point you could just drop off a 3D printer somewhere in the world and come back a year later and there'll be lots of them for people to use. What are some of the impacts of 3D printing? So manufacturing costs are made up of three elements. The raw materials, which are not usually the biggest cost. It's usually the complexity of how sophisticated what you're manufacturing is. What's interesting about that is that 3D printing allows us to make more complex physical goods than we can make with any of the other current manufacturing technologies that we have. So the cost of complexity essentially goes to zero in the cost of physical goods. Then what you have left is inefficiencies. So if I'm sending raw goods across the world, and then they're manufacturing them there, and then they're shipping them back to me, that's an inefficiency that will go away when I can print it down the street or in my garage. And ultimately, you see the same thing that happens to information, which is it is almost free now on the internet. And if you find a paid version, you could probably find a free version for any topic in the world. Those elements are going to free as well because they've been digitized. And you'll be faced with the raw material cost, which we'll talk a little bit more about biotechnology, but as synthetic biology and engineering, biological engineering advances, we'll ultimately be able to grow those raw materials as well. When you have artificial intelligence and you have low-cost sensors and you have 3D printing, you really can advance robotics. And robotics is at a very exciting stage right now. The top two, the one on the left and the picture on the top, are both manufactured by Boston Dynamics. Both of those, the one on the right carries heavy equipment on all sorts of surfaces, including ice. What's interesting about them is they're self-balancing. So if while they're walking you push them, they will stabilize themselves and struggle to do that. And for the first time you look at it and it looks very lifelike in how it responds. And some people actually have a reaction if someone kicks the thing, that they somehow feel an emotional reaction because of the response looks so lifelike that they feel like the person kicking it is being mean. But really, it's like a tuna can. And we're going to see more of this. The robot on the left does a significant range of human activity. And we're really now, these are functioning today. You can find them on YouTube and get a sense of when we think about the exponential growth versus the linear growth, where these will be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The one on the bottom right is actually a bird, and If you're far enough away, it moves in such a manner that you can't even tell if it's a robot. There are robots now that are swarm quadcopters that move in formation in and out of buildings. There are hummingbird robots that will fly into a building. And there are a whole host of benefits that will come with robotics. And more importantly, you can think about all of the opportunities for, again, innovation and entrepreneurs. And this is going to be an area where, when you open it up to young people, and it doesn't cost a lot of money, again, you'll see significant innovation that we all get to share in the advances of what people create. Same way we did with the internet. So Google built a self-driving car. It drives by itself with someone in the passenger seat. It has driven 500,000, there's 500,000 kilometers across the US now for some time. Coast to coast, traffic, cities, schools. Here it's doing, of course, very fast actually. If this were a video, the passenger is quite scared in the video. It's driving itself using the system at the top called LiDAR. And in all of those miles, and kilometers, it's only had 2 accidents. One was when someone else rear-ended it from behind while it was stopped at a light. And the other was when one of the engineers had gotten in and started driving the car. So, there it is on the highways, driving across the US. Most people don't realize what it was. It says self-driving car. And you can pull up next to it and see there's nobody in the driver's seat. This is the LiDAR system it uses. So it scans in all 3 directions. It's a centimeter accurate. The system costs $75,000 today. And now we can go back to our price-performance curves and we can understand that eventually it's going to get to $300 and every vehicle will be self-driving. So let's think about the significance of this. First of all, auto accidents are one of the largest causes of death around the world and are extremely unnecessary. Humans are inherently not designed to be good drivers. We're distracted, we're talking, we have 2 eyes, they're in the front, we can't see around the car. The car sees all directions with sensors everywhere all the time. It never sleeps, it never eats, it never sends text messages. The cars can talk to each other. So self-driving cars, and Google has 12 of them now, they come to our classroom at Singularity University so our students can go out and learn about the LiDAR and sit in the car. And they can speak to each other in real time on the road so that they can actually drive very quickly and be very close together. So you think about 2 sides of this. One is the efficiency of the roadways. So you can have something that actually looks like a train with a series of self-driving cars funneling people down highways, and you can really release a lot of congestion from the highways. In one of the videos from Google, you see a blind person who's being driven around by their self-driving car. They're obviously one of the first beneficiaries. And then think about how much time we spend in our lives just doing this. And all the productivity that would be recaptured if we could put that energy towards something else. The downside of this, of course, is what happens to all the jobs for people who drive. What happens when all the commercial trucks that deliver goods around the country are driven by themselves, and taxi drivers, and the list goes on and on and on. Your car will become 4 seats facing inside where you can talk and have a conversation and do work while you're being driven to work. But hopefully, as we've seen time and time again, new jobs appear to replace the old jobs. And it's going to be for the people who build the LiDAR and maintain the LiDAR systems on the cars, etc. One of the questions that always comes up at the end, there's a few questions that always come up at the end of our talks. One is security, and the other is jobs. And I think in the turn of the 20th century in the US, 1900, approximately 70% of people were in occupations related to agriculture somehow. And if at that time you said, in 2012, 3% of the US population would be employed in agriculture, which is what the number is, and of course we produce significantly much more food now with that small number of people using technology and productivity. But everyone would have said the same thing, is it'll be the end of the world. 70% of the population is employed in agriculture. And then if you would have said to them, no, it's okay, you're going to be web designers, and you're going to be doing algorithms, they would have looked at you like you're from another planet. And so ultimately, there will be new jobs created in managing robotics and other things. The question is, will they always replace the number? And what do you do with those people? But that's a digression. It's a topic we can discuss later in Q&A. Here's some more news about it. The state of Nevada in the US just approved and gave a license to Google to drive their driverless cars in the state of Nevada. I suspect other states will follow soon. You can also have things delivered to you from the store. There's a lot of things, if you keep thinking about it, benefits. Another interesting area is brain-computer interfaces, which are making incredible advances in. This company, BrainGate, who's also come to Singularity University, actually implants a chip on the motor cortex for people who are paralyzed, quadriplegics, and allows them actually to transmit signals to a computer screen to move their mouse. And so they learn, while they have the chip in their brain, that if they think this thought, cursor goes left, if they think that, cursor goes right, and their neural pathways grow around the chip and connect with it so that they can communicate with the outside world. They can do all sorts of things. They'll be able to turn on TV and turn on lights and turn off lights and motorized wheelchairs or all sorts of other things. You can imagine how liberating that would be for someone to be able to communicate and control electronic and mechanical things when they couldn't before. It's not just happening with implants. There are brain interfaces now that we're getting better and better at developing that you just wear. There was one demonstration that was given in Canada where you could sit in a chair during a large fair, and I can't remember the name of it, and you could see landmarks in different cities in Canada where the person wearing it would think of a color, and the building and the bridge would change color on the other side of Canada based on whatever they were thinking. So these are being employed today in small tests, and there are a few companies working on it. We're at the point now where we can read blurry but very legible small words that you're thinking by putting you inside a scanner. So the word house, for example, we can make out those letters if you're thinking of that word. Of course, the performance will continue to accelerate there, and that's a scary one for everybody, obviously. But think about where you walk into your house, and your house knows what kind of day you had. It adjusts the music accordingly, the temperature. For people with illnesses, this becomes important again with biofeedback, stress levels, especially neurological disorders, Parkinson's and other things. They can adjust music for people. So there's a lot of opportunity here. Talk about biotech for a minute. That's an incredibly exciting area. The blue line at the top you see is Moore's Law. I described the performance price for chips, computing chips, and the black line underneath it is the cost of genetic sequencing, which is just basically reading, and it's dropping much faster than Moore's Law, about 5 times the rate. And that's going to have serious implications. This is one of many young DIY biotech, or biohackers, as they're sometimes called. It's young people who have decided instead of learning to code in software, they were going to start coding in biology. The cost of the equipment has come down, it's going to continue to come down. They're building them in their garages and bedrooms, and they're starting to read DNA and play with yeast and amoeba and bacteria to innovate and produce fuels and eventually pharmaceuticals. There are 2 community biolabs right now in the US, one in New York and one very close to us that was co-founded by one of our faculty at biotech. It's called BioCurious, and anyone can join for $100 a month, and you have a full biotech lab. It's like a health club membership in the US, similar price. They have classes all in the evenings, a lot of them taught by fellow members. The youngest person who teaches in it, she's 8 years old, and she teaches a course on some basic biotech for people just coming in. So we saw a generation of people learning software, young people, and coding, and that's still happening. We're seeing the tail end of that now. And we're about to see another 20, 30 years. And when you listen to a lot of the people today who are very senior in the tech industry, they'll say, if I were young today, I would go into biotech, because it's just another type of read and write. This is an example of a Singularity University company called Genome Compiler. And what you see here on the bottom is the process for software. The code is on the left, zeros and ones, and you have a compiler where you design software, you debug it, compile it, and you actually have executable programs, and you run it on hardware of computer. Well, Genome Compiler looked at this and said, well, we know the code is GATC for life, and we know the software is the chromosomes, and it runs inside the cell, which is the hardware. But at the time, even today, when synthetic biology or genetic engineering is done, they're literally cutting and pasting each nucleotide, the GATC, and it's more like cutting out the ransom note. It's very bulky, and what was missing was a compiler. Nobody codes software in zeros and ones. They use compilers. And so they created Genome Compiler, which allows you on your laptop to just drag and drop portions of genetic code from different life forms, chromosomes, etc. And then when you built what you want to build, you just hit send. It goes to a company. There are a few companies in the US. One's called DNA 2.0 in Silicon Valley, where $45 a base pair, whatever you design, they'll send you your life form in a little test tube. And so you can take the glow-in-the-dark part of the genes of a jellyfish, and you can create a glow-in-the-dark cat, or glow-in-the-dark trees, or dark streets. This is probably the things that is the scariest for people when you think about anyone being able to write life or alter life. And there's a whole discussion we can have, and we spend a lot of time in Singularity University talking about the threats of technology. Historically, as technology has always moved forward, it's always brought with it more threats. Today, a small group of hackers can take down organizations around the world, and we see it with groups like Anonymous and others. The power will continue to increase for individuals as the technologies get stronger. But so far, we've continued to see that the benefits from these technologies and the advancement has outweighed the cost and the price we've paid so far. I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of students come to Singularity University. In our graduate studies program, we look for three things. We look for just brilliant people who can handle graduate level technology discussions. They don't actually have to be technologists, but they need to be able to handle the concepts. We need to see some sort of an entrepreneurial background and some success. It doesn't have to be a business, it can be a project, an organization, something. And an interest in the world's grand challenges that I discussed. In the summer program, the average age is 31, but we have people that are 18 that are brilliant, working on their PhDs, up to people in their 50s. So we don't really have a specific age or degree or what we look for. We're just looking for people who have the potential to leverage these technologies and change the world. In 2009, our first summer, we had 1,200 applicants. Last year, we had 4,100 applicants for 80 spots. And we're happy to continue to see global awareness increase that. The 10-week program looks like this. There's a first week, which is an exploration of the world's grand challenges. There's a 5-week deep dive into exponential technologies. 300 hours of lecture, 160 of the world's thinkers come through. Then we go on site visits, and we take people into the companies that are using these technologies. Companies like Exobionics that are building robotic legs for quadriplegics, and Amyris Biofuels and others. And then the last 4 weeks is called the 10 to the 9th Plus Impact Project. From the beginning, the school was always designed to be more entrepreneurial than academic, and you stayed in the classroom as long as you had to go out and build something. Our founders are entrepreneurs, and most of us that are on the team are entrepreneurs. And so from the beginning, it was designed this way. And really, this is that billion-person challenge I talked about. A few companies I'll highlight. One is called GetAround. This was from our 2009 class. Apparently, cars sit idle and unused 92% of the time. You're sleeping or they're in the parking lot at work. This team said we can use the proliferation of mobile technology, put a Wi-Fi in the car So you can basically rent anyone's car. And so now people who can't afford cars can now rent the car next door instead of having to go to the expense for an hour. People who own cars can generate more revenue. They might be able to get a better car. It takes cars off the road. It eliminates parking and congestion because now you have higher utilization of fewer cars rather than a whole bunch of cars being used 8% of the time. Just drive around today and think about look at how many cars you see parked unused. So this team is doing very well. They've gotten their second round of funding, and there are cars all over San Francisco, individuals. They set their own price, they put it up there for rent, and there's a blanket insurance policy that whatever happens gets covered. Obviously that will also help with the environment. Blue Oak Resources is using bacteria to mine precious metals out of discarded electronics. So I talked about the growth of electronics and how we're going to have 5 billion mobile phones and computers and everything's going to be connected, and the downside of that is there's all that waste when you're done and you buy the next version. At the recent Open Innovation Forum in Moscow last week, they talked about the depletion of precious metals. And it turns out there is more gold in a pound of discarded electronics, or I could say a gram or kilogram, than there is in the equal amount of weight of gold ore, which is counterintuitive. You wouldn't think that. So this company is using a unique process with bacteria to extract those precious metals and put them back into circulation. They're sitting inside of a very famous venture capital firm in Silicon Valley called Baldinnuchi. One team looked at poverty and they said, this is a 2010 team, how do we get these technologies to people if there are no roads or the roads are washed out during the rainy seasons, which is the case for much of the world. And then during one of our sessions on drones, they thought, well, the drone price is actually competitive now with the motorcycle. Because remember we talk about the price performance decreasing. And they said, they looked at Africa and said, they never developed a telephone landline system the way we had in the US with actual cables running. They just skipped right to the cell phone. It didn't make sense, right? And you can think about it similarly with transportation. Maybe they won't need to build a road infrastructure as extensively if they skip right to aerial and it becomes cheap enough to fly things using quadcopters connected through a series of artificial intelligence bases. Then you would create something that they call the Matternet, so that you can send valuable medicines to distant villages and other things like that. You'll start with the high-value, low-weight items. Right now, these drones can carry 2 kilograms, approximately 10 kilometers. But the price performance is changing by a factor of 10 every year. So next year, that will be 20 kilograms. So you can kind of see where this is going. And again, this is innovators thinking about where price performance will be in 2 years, and they'll be positioned to be a significant company in that space. This is them down in Haiti, where we have a lot of relationships with governments around the world, and obviously given the post-earthquake situation, they see an opportunity with a lack of infrastructure there to potentially deliver medicines and other needed goods around that devastated area. Here's the quadcopter flying over. And now artificial intelligence and the cost of the drones and power efficiency are all at the place that makes this possible. This is a team from this year called Med Sensations, and they were a combination of a hardware programmer from Israel, a software programmer from Indonesia, and a Harvard medical student from the US. And they came up with a glove that can actually use to test all the physical touch tests that a doctor would do from a distance. So the doctor can get that same data by having somebody wear this glove. And actually, it has better performance than human can, because it has a sonogram built into it. So this is just one example. They built that, that's a working prototype that they built in 3 weeks. They came up with the concept, they built the prototype, and they demonstrated it on stage. So they're pursuing this company. Let me talk a minute about the global impact competitions that Andre mentioned before. We started in 2010 with a test in Brazil that said, we want our students to come up with an idea that will impact 1 billion people over 10 years. If you can come up with an idea that will impact 1 million people in your city or region, then a group of corporations, through a contest, will sponsor the winner of that to come to Singularity University for the summer in our program. And that test was incredibly successful. We had 230 innovations entered. We brought the winner to US, had a great summer at the Graduate Studies program in Singularity University. So we extended it to 12 students in 2011. Last year, we went to 16 countries and brought in 20 students. And next year, 2013, we're going to be doing 17 countries and 23 students. And School of Hope Foundation is partnering with us to help run the contest here as well. So we're very excited about that. The contest will be appearing on the Open University School of Hope Foundation website December-ish? December applications will open if you're interested. And I think that the goal is to select a winner by February. Not only does this wind up helping identify great people for Singularity University, but the local area winds up with hundreds of projects, and we're looking at leaving second and third prize winners some capital to try to implement those projects in the regions. We also run an executive program, I mentioned that, CEOs, CTOs, government leaders, hedge fund investors, interested people. And ultimately, we're trying to send people back home with expanded minds, incredible networks of people who are passionate and then are empowered to think exponentially and understand these technologies. We have approximately 800 alumni in 75 countries. And for our senior execs and others, we want this to apply in their larger companies and industries to apply this type of thinking. What we're doing in the future is going to continue to expand our educational programs. We are going to move online. Our goal in 2013 is to get an online version of our program that people can take from anywhere in the world. We're rolling out a series of conferences around the world in key cities where we take the faculty of Singularity University and we do a 2-day small version of what we're about for people. And we're trying to see if we can get Russia to be one of those 3 countries we do next year, and then continue to grow it around the world to come to where people are and give them a sampling of Singularity University and hopefully inspire them and build a community. Lastly, Singularity University Labs is where we support the projects. People come out of the classroom and it's time to start building something. We have a series of programs that we do virtually for our alumni around the world. Content, programming, mentorship, discounts for all the things they need, web hosting, etc., all sorts of vendor services. We're launching a venture fund as well in 2013 to help support these companies. In the meantime, we obviously have a network of investors that we introduce them to. And as we build out our international forums and others, we'll have more of a presence to help support and promote these companies. That's it for set remarks. We can do Q&A or...
Сейчас мы уточним. Gabriel показал пример еще одного заведения, которое существует в Кремниевой долине, и с одной стороны ни в коем случае это не образовательное, с другой стороны рассказывает о том, что нам делать в будущем, какими технологиями мы будем иметь дело через несколько лет, и, соответственно, имея это в голове, можно уже будет планировать свои бизнес-проекты. Есть ли сейчас вопросы к Gabriel, или мы перейдем к следующей лекции? Поднимите, пожалуйста, руки, если есть вопросы. Так, пожалуйста. Микрофон есть? Да, может быть, вот здесь можно включать, чтобы все слышали. Главное, чтобы слышал переводчик, который...
Здравствуйте, Gabriel. Меня зовут Александр. Расскажите, пожалуйста, ваш университет создан в 2009 году. Я правильно понимаю, все вот разработки, показанные сегодня в презентации, это заслуга вашего университета? Или вы все это аккумулируете и создаете новую философию мышления?
Good question. Primarily, they have been alumni from our programs, the summer program, and the projects that were created in the summer program. We also have several companies that come from either alumni who maybe a year later they quit their jobs from the executive program and they want to start a company, or our faculty. Several of our faculty are co-founders in companies. Our head of robotics has a robotics telepresence robot company. there are a few companies that we've decided to accept as SU companies that are connected to someone in our organization that are pursuing a mission that's very aligned with ours and we feel will be additive to the community. And so we're exploring how, I think once we have our online program, we'll be able to funnel everyone through that, because for us it's important. Even these outside companies have gone through our program after the fact, because they have to understand our way of thinking.
Я от себя добавлю, что, конечно, университет, он скорее показывает те тенденции, которые в мире происходят, и почему, допустим, мы делали совместную программу, приглашали Singularity уже в Москву в мае, когда проводили трехдневную совместную программу, именно для того, чтобы показать, куда двигаются технологии, какие направления, что в мире существует. И чтобы не изобретать велосипед, когда там, сколько выдается проект, а это уже есть. И чтобы быть осведомленным, для этого такая программа и в том числе существует. А какие-то вопросы еще есть, Gabriel? Да, пожалуйста.
Gabriel, спасибо за донесенную информацию. Скажите, что касаемо вопросов психологии, развития в психологии и философии, затрагиваются в рамках обучения в вашем университете?
We wind up touching them specifically in the context of how humanity is going to deal with all of these changes. The closest we probably get to psychology is through the neuroscience. There's two ways we're understanding the brain. One is by reverse engineering it. And we're starting to understand how actually a lot of what we think of psychology is driven by certain regions of the brain, things you can do to create humor or certain emotions. The other way, of course, is engineering artificial intelligence. As we do that, it helps us understand. When we talk about philosophy, and we talk about psychology from the other end, it's always on the impact of things like teenagers and, putting the genetic code of my tumor on the internet so hackers from around the world can try to figure out how to hack it. What does that do for us as a society when there's robots walking next to us? So, but not in a traditional track of philosophy or psychology.
Еще вопросы? Да, пожалуйста.
Добрый день. Спасибо вам большое за вашу презентацию. Меня зовут Андрей. Мне хотелось бы узнать, вы в конце своей презентации сказали, что будут запущены некоторые пилотные проекты и будут проводиться открытые конференции на несколько дней, в частности на 2 дня. Планируется ли что-то подобное в России? Спасибо.
That is the plan. Well, I'm working on it.
Пожалуйста, следующий.
Вопрос. Работаете ли вы в области военных технологий?
I missed the first part. I heard military technology. What was it? We don't work with, we have military people who come through our program, but as an organization we don't work with a military. Corporations will send individuals through SU, governments will, and some people do come from different agencies, different organizations around the world. They watch us, we watch what we talk about in our classroom, but we're not doing work for them behind the scenes.
Следующий.
Можно вопрос задать насчет обучения предпринимательству, и Андрею, и Габриэлю, соответственно. Можно ли вообще научиться предпринимательству? Может быть, это все-таки да. Ричард Брэнсон, по-моему, не учился, наверное, предпринимательству. Вот ваше мнение, можно ли создать предпринимательскую, обучающую предпринимательскую среду, и какие успехи, какие ключевые элементы обучения предпринимательству? Спасибо.
Безусловно, есть люди, для которых это да, и Ричард Брэнсон, конечно же, его не надо было учить. Есть такие люди, которые сами все знают и все делают. Но, с другой стороны, для чего был, в принципе, затеян проект Сколково, как я сказал вначале, именно для того, чтобы помочь тем, у кого есть потенциал. То есть это не какие-то сверхспособности. Если у вас есть уже технологический бэкграунд или научный, и технически вам надо превратить это в компанию, в стартап и так далее. Этому действительно можно учиться, потому что надо знать вещи от как правильно оформить патент, до как построить бизнес-модель, на чем, и в том числе узнать рыночный спрос и так далее. Безусловно, есть такие другие проекты, тот же Facebook, которые нельзя было ни предсказать, ни сделать, ни научить и так далее. Но в большинстве случаев все-таки есть инструменты, которые помогают продвигать дальше. Поэтому Сколково создано.
Yes, absolutely. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life from the time I was 17, and often pondered this question, especially after having the good fortune of being able to work with Richard for 5 years. I think entrepreneurship is changing, and being an entrepreneur 10, 20 years ago is very different from being an entrepreneur today. And it's getting easier, and it's going to continue to get easier. And what's happening is that being an entrepreneur, and can you teach someone to be an entrepreneur, was more questionable at a time when there weren't best practices for understanding how to manage product development, how to manage customer acquisition, how to manage risk, more of a scientific approach to entrepreneurship, which we have today. And if you're not reading people like Eric Ries, R-I-E-S, and Lean Startup, and Steve Blank, in terms of, these are kind of the cutting edge in thinking about how to know what you're doing, how to minimize your risk along the way. And so it's not kind of this blind, wandering effort that is partially based on luck, and really ultimately at the end boils down to how much determination you have, because people have been working blind. And so the ones with the most determination would just stick at it until they found their way, or just do whatever they had to remove those risks. And that's how we defined entrepreneurship in the past. That determined person who was hustling was like a stereotype. And now it's becoming more scientific. And people can learn to be entrepreneurs, they can become inspired. Richard Branson learned a lot along the way. He was successful with records, he was successful with planes, and then he tried to launch Virgin Cola to take on Coke and Pepsi in the US. Failed miserably, he had a lot of failures. Just like Google continues to fail when they launch some businesses, like Google Health and Google Wave. But I saw throughout his maturity, and Richard's still learning, I think, entrepreneurship is an expertise, and it is something you continue to get better at. And even the best people, have a high failure rate. But I think you can learn it. You do need some element of determination though, and the amount you need is coming down if you're smart, but you still need to be able to take some risks and work hard. And the flip side of the need for determination now is largely driven by the dramatic increase in competition. Because the costs have come down for you, they've come down for everybody. And so ultimately it means that you're racing and working all night to build a better product for the next person, or find the investor before someone else does, or get your product to market first, because everybody has the same ideas, and the skills now are about speed of execution, design of product and the customer acquisition. The psychological pieces, ultimately what you're trying to do is influence human behavior. You're trying to get someone, when you show them this, to react a certain way, to reach in their pocket, take out money. And so there's a lot of soft understandings that come in the consumer psychology. But anyway, those are just some thoughts on entrepreneurship.
Спасибо. Я думаю, давайте последний вопрос, а потом следующий спикер передадим.
Thank you for your lecture. I'm Лена. Вопрос на русском. Немного провокационный в качестве продолжения. Как вы считаете, экономисты в будущем. Технологии сами могут свои стартапы продвигать. Какова наша роль? Я сама как экономист-менеджер, правильно? То есть, допустят ли нас такие стартаперы помочь им, да, чтобы получить энергетический эффект? Либо же, по вашему опыту, удачные идеи сами продвигаются их изобретателями. Спасибо.
I think there is still a role for the business person, and it's not just because that's what I was or am. You know, a good starting team today, Paul Graham from Y Combinator says that the right team has the 3 Ds. It has development, design, and distribution. And what you've seen over the recent history is technologists and developers, and this is the software industry we're speaking about because it's had so much entrepreneurship, but they basically adopted, and you think about the Mark Zuckerbergs, right? They learned through some of the educational best practices that we've been talking about how to do the business side. And some of them have done that better than others. So they go to the places like Y Combinator to learn to be entrepreneurs. Ultimately though, they wind up doing more and more of that. And so whether it's a technologist who understands the business side, or it's a business person who comes to a team and is able to understand customer acquisition and marketing. I mean, you have the flip side too, where you have people who are not technologists starting some of the biggest internet companies when 15 years ago you couldn't really. Now you can work with some developers, partner with developers. You think about companies like Guild Group and others, a lot of the online commerce companies where the founders weren't technical. So I think what you're seeing is a flexibility for both models. If a technical team ultimately wants to learn the business side, they can. Ultimately, it makes what's important ultimately is that you have a team who people are focused on one of the needs. It doesn't matter where they come from; they're ultimately going to have to wind up being focused on, marketing or so, because there's a lot to do. It's challenging to start and build a company successfully.
Надежда есть. Тогда...
That's why we're here. That's why I'm in Voronezh.
Переходим мы, соответственно, к одному из D, о котором сказал Gabriel, дизайну. Мария, пожалуйста, расскажи нам, зачем нам